want to play with my brother.
Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do a deep dive into 2017. We're going to talk about books that were published, books that won awards. I even read some books from 2017 and I am so excited to get into all of that with you. If you're new to my channel, then hi, I'm Shelly. I love books and reading, love it so much, so much so that I have a whole channel dedicated to the hobby. And if you are enjoying the vibe, I would encourage you to subscribe, stick around, and without any further rambling on, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. This idea really started with the New York Times and their now infamous list, the best books of the 21st century. And I started to think, what has actually been published in the 21st century? And I was thinking, like, I really want to know this century more in terms of books and publishing. And I did a deep dive on the year 2000, in which I read The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon, and I love that book. So I'm so glad I'm doing this project. I also expanded it, and I decided to do somewhat of a deep dive into the 1960s, primarily 1960 to 1964. And now I'm at 2017. Now here's the thing, I would have gone in order, like the year 2000, then 2001. However, 2001 is giving me a time, an absolute time, and I've just not had the best reading experience with 2001. So I happened to be reading two books from 2017, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this deep dive on 2017. It's working out with my reading naturally, and so why not just put it all together? And so we're going to be looking at the publishing industry in general. I'll probably at some point tell you what I read and what I thought of what I read. I finished two books from 2017. I also just want to talk about books that won awards, bookish news events, things like that was happening in 2017. And I will also talk about Steve Donahue's not best and worst. It's really just best books of 2017, which I am excited to share with you. So it'll be 10 nonfiction and 10 fiction books. Steve Donahue is a book critic who I follow religiously. I love his recommendations, and it gives me a lot of joy to share his lists with you, so that will also be included in this video. I'm sure I'll have some timestamps down below in case you want to navigate this video. But let's first talk about books that were published in 2017. This is why I have my brand new computer in front of me. Books that were published in 2017. I am on trusty old Goodreads to kind of get a picture of what has been read that was published in 2017. So let's kind of just scroll together. It's going to go from most popular on the Goodreads site, most popular to least popular. Okay, and I'm only going to talk about the books for which I have something to say. So the number one book is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have not read this book, shockingly. I mean, well, I guess if you know me, I don't have anything against Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm sure that this book is wonderful. People seem to really love it. I read Daisy Jones and the Six, and it was good. I enjoyed it, but I was kind of like, I'm good with my Jenkins Reid moment, and I haven't read anything further from her. Then we also have A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is part of the ACOTAR series, the number 3 in that series by Sarah J. Maas. I've read number 1. I have a whole review on the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, on my channel. I will leave that linked down below. However, if you really love ACOTAR and you don't want to see a negative review of that book, then don't watch my review. It's just, I don't know. It's not for people who don't love that book, because I did not love it. Okay, a book that I have read, number 3, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I read this when it was not quite first published, but maybe around the time when it was really growing in popularity. I think I read it in like 2019. It's about a young girl, and at the very beginning of the book, she witnesses her friend dying because of police brutality. A young black girl, and her friend is, passes away because of, or is murdered really because of police brutality. And it's the processing of that situation. It's good. I think some people will really, really love this book. I remember thinking, it's good. I liked it, but it is not a favorite. Oh my goodness, Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I remember when this came out and Reese Witherspoon of Reese's Book Club picked this as her, choice of her book club choice, and everyone went bananas over it. And I remember thinking after I read it, really? Everyone went bananas over this book? It is, let me reacquaint myself with what this book is about. It's as boring as I remember. It's about like a rich family, a wealthy family, a family that has a standing in the community, and they get entangled with a single woman and her daughter, and drama happens. I did not love it, if I'm being honest with you. Number 5 is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I've never even heard of this book. But number 6, I've read. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. It's about a woman named Eleanor Oliphant, if you can imagine, who is an odd duck. She is an odd duck, and the way that she relates to others in society is odd, and the way it's following the way that she moves through the world and the people that she meets. It was fine. It was okay. I can't say that I loved it. I remember when this book came out, Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. At this point, I'd cycled out of my John Green reading phase. I had went through a phase where I read quite a few John Green books, and at this point, I remember it getting mixed reviews, and I was just not reading John Green anymore. So, this was a miss. I skipped this book, and I'm still glad that my past self didn't spend time on this book, because from what I know of it, it's not his best work. And even his best work is, in my honest opinion, not great. 9 and 10 are 2 historical fiction authors that I feel like there's a possibility I would get along with them. Before You Were Gone by Lisa Wingate. I know that she is very popular among historical fiction readers. And The Alice Network by Kate Quinn, another super popular author for fans of historical fiction, and I'm a fan of historical fiction. But I like to say that I like weird historical fiction. I like the stuff that's a little bit off the beaten path, a little weird, a little odd. I really love, my favorite historical fiction of all time is Wolf Hall, and probably the whole series. And probably my second favorite historical fiction of all time is M, Son of the Century by Antonio Scarlatti. Those are my 2 favorite, and they're weird, chunky, slow moving historical fiction. So you would think that I maybe would like Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, but no, I do not. It was not my favorite. I was so glad when it ended. I cannot, I viciously dislike that book. I'm so sorry for people who love it. If you love it, don't let me yuck your yum. I just did not care for that book at all. Several books I maybe have heard of or have faintly heard of, but I know nothing about. So number 12, When We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. And One of Us is Lying by Karen M. Macinus. I don't know. I don't think I've even heard of these. And then we have Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. I have read the other book. I read Normal People by Sally Rooney, and that was kind of enough Sally Rooney for me. I know so many people love her, but I just I couldn't get behind. I'm not a fangirl. I'm not a fangirl. I'm so sorry. More books that I've never really heard of. Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. Oh, Tender as the Flesh by Augustina Batsierka. I've been meaning to read this. It's translated by Sarah Moses, and I've heard it's creepy and weird, and every time I mention that I want to read this, there's somebody in the comments that says, I want to know what you think of this book, because reactions from booktubers is hilarious, and then I just go on not reading it. So shame on me, I guess. I'll get to it eventually. More books I haven't heard of. The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. Without Merit. Nope. By Colleen Hoover. Know her. Read one book by her. Never again. Never again. Oh, a book I do want to read eventually is Killers of the Flower Moon by David Gran. I heard that this is This is definitely a nonfiction book, and it reads like a thriller, like an investigative crime thriller book. And it is about Indigenous persons and wrongs that were done to them and cover-ups and, I don't know, government cover-ups maybe? I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, one that I definitely want to read eventually. Andy Weir published a book in 2017. More books I have not heard of. Oh, I read part of Beneath the Scarlet Sky by Mark T. Sullivan. Yeah, I hard DNF'd that. The writing was atrocious. It was awful. I DNF'd that sucker so quickly and gave it away. I probably sold it back to a used bookstore. I was like, nope, not for me. It is, I think it was originally self-published, and it read like it was originally self-published. I'm so sorry if you are a huge fan of this book, but it just did not work for me. Harry's barking. I have to go assist him. More books from authors I haven't read, which is Alice Feeney, Riley Sager, Jenny Han. I have read an S.A. Chakraborty book, but this is her first book in, I think, her most popular series, which is City of Brass. The first book is called City of Brass. And then All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the first book in the Murderbot series, which is about like a snarky millennial-esque murderbot that is having an existential crisis. I really enjoyed the first book in the Murderbot series. All right, more books. Oh, Neil Gaiman? I don't actually, is it Gaiman or Gaiman? I don't know. His book Norse Mythology came out. Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson came out. I've read one Walter Isaacson book, which was The Codebreaker. It was okay. Actually, I didn't love it, but it was, it was fine. I think I might like, because The Codebreaker is a biography of someone who's still living. It was someone, I forget her name, but anyways, the woman, The Codebreaker, was somebody who helped really help push forward the way that we test for COVID. And I thought it was fine, but I thought the author did a lot of self-inserts. And so it would be really interesting to see how Isaacson handles Leonardo da Vinci, since he can't say, when I walked up to that house. I mean, I guess he could, if it's like I visited where da Vinci had, lived or something. But I think he has less of an opportunity to self-insert, which I think would probably be a better read, at least for me as a reader. Another book I recognize, Less by Andrew Sean Greer. This won the Pulitzer Prize, I believe, and I read this and I wrapped it up on my first ever wrap-up on BookTube. I like this book. I thought it was really good and executed well. Greer is being critical of the publishing industry through his protagonist, who is a failed novelist, and he kind of goes on this world tour, and it's a bit of like a self-discovery kind of book. It's not coming of age because the main character is like 50 years old and trying to work through some problems that he has. And I don't know, it has stuck with me longer than I thought it would have stuck. It's actually been, one of those books that I think back on fondly of which I think back fondly. There you go. Oh, I see the Heart's Invisible Furies. I may or may not have read this book for this project. Brandon Sanderson came out with Oathbreakers, which is the third book in the Stormlight Archive. The man writes like 5 books a year, so I'm not surprised that he's on this list. Frederick Bachman has a book that came out, Us Against You, Beartown #2. I've only read A Man Called Uwe. It's the only Bachman I've read. Lincoln in the Bardo, famously I have that on my shelves somewhere, unread, by George Saunders. The Idiot by Elif Bottoman. This is, I read this, I actually have it on my shelves. I read this with my friend Fraser. It was our first buddy read and we really bonded over it. And sometimes the experience of bonding over a book really just, makes everything 1,000 times better. And so this is about a young woman who is going through her freshman year in college and on the struggle bus. I liked it. It's very witty, but it's also very quiet. So you kind of have to like both of those things to get along with the book. Sing Unburied Sing by Jessamine Ward came out. I actually own this book on my Kindle, but haven't read it yet. Oh, Hunger by Roxane Gay. It's a memoir that Roxane Gay put out. I read it and I didn't love it. It's about someone who is inhabiting a larger body and what that is like. And it's a bit of a slice of life book, and a bit of her meditations of being someone who inhabits a larger body. But you know, it was fine. I think, and I have on my shelves Bad Feminist by her, which I think I'll actually enjoy quite a bit more. I've actually read Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. I read this a bit ago, and I was like reading books super fast in graduate school. It was for a graduate school class I was in, and I remember liking it. Jason Reynolds he's got this wonderful way with words. It's very poetic, it's very rhythmic, and this young person is on his way to do something quite disastrous, and as he's taking the elevator down, every stop he meets someone along the way that gives him a better piece of the story to help him understand like what happened and help influence what he's about to do, if that makes sense. But it's very it's very poetic, it's very rhythmic, and I remember quite liking it at the time. Alice Hoffman put out a book, Veronica Roth. Remember from Divergent? Were you all around during that time when Veronica Roth's Divergent was like the best thing since sliced bread? I mean, who read Mark the Cave? I don't think, 91,000 people rated it, so at least 91,000 people had read it. Sleeping Beauties by Stephen King came out. Oh, N.K. Jemisin, The Stone Sky, the third book in her Broken Earth trilogy. I've not read it, but I've heard people talk about it with great gusto. Ooh, Home Fire by Kamala Shamsi. I own that book, and I've heard it's amazing. That came out in 2017. I'm surprised. Stranger in the Woods. I've read this by Michael Finklay. It was about a man who chooses to live as a hermit, and he ends up breaking into people's cabins to like steal their items and their books, and that's how he survives. So he's like petty thief, but also a hermit, and has like truly removes himself from society except for when he steals people's stuff. It was a true story, interesting book. When I first read it, I think I was more enamored with it than I am now, having thought about it, years later. Ooh, Anything is Possible by Elizabeth Strout. This is her number 2 in the MGASH series, which I love that series. I love Elizabeth Strout. I think that her writing is so down to earth. It's like cozy literary. That's what I've heard her described as, and you can probably hear my yard guy going, it's fine. It's fine. We're just going to keep going. And Anything is Possible is a short story collection set in her fictional town, MGASH, and you see the way that the people, like, I don't know, it's sort of like small town drama. I really liked it. But I'm a fan of that whole series. E.L. James is still capitalizing on her 50 Shades of Grey book with Darker. Good for her, I suppose. I'm really scrolling through these quickly so we can I don't see any other books that I really know of, like some vague recollections of names, but no one that I'm really super familiar with. Oh, so Roxane Gay also came out with Difficult Women the same year that she came out with Hunger. She must have been really busy this year. The 7th book in the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey came out. Several of my friends love that series, and so of course it makes me want to read it. Ooh, Ta-Nehisi Coates came out with We Were 8 Years in Power. I really have enjoyed Coates' writing, especially Between the World and Me. I really love that book. Oh, and then the number 200 is The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, which is going to come up again later in this video. It's not one that I read, but I've heard amazing things about that book, and I own it it's on my shelves back here. It's somewhere on my shelves back here. Okay, so that was kind of our overview of what was happening in 2000 in terms of like the 200 most shelved books on Goodreads. And as I finish talking with you, my yard guy leaves. Timing is perfect for me. All right, let's move on to a different location, and I'll talk about one of the books that I read. I'm gonna leave my favorite book for last. I read 2 books, and one of them was amazing, like so good, and we're gonna leave it for last because that's what I feel like I want to do. The first book I read was Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Sukegawa, and it was translated by Allison Watts. Now, this is a very short book. It is like 218 pages, but it felt even shorter. I actually listened to the audiobook, and I like the narrator. So it is about Sentaro, who is somebody who is working in a, what is it called? I have to look it up. Juggling a couple things here. Dorayaki. He's working in a dorayaki shop. And from what I gathered, dorayaki is like a pancake, a Japanese pancake. It was originally written in the Japanese and then translated into English. I don't know what's going on. I guess he's out of here. Okay. Anyways, the book is also set in Japan, and we have this main character, Sentaro, who's working at a dorayaki shop, which is like a sweets dessert shop. And from what I gathered, dorayaki is like a pancake that at the center there is a sweet bean paste. And I've had sweet bean paste before. It's almost like a differently flavored kind of peanut butter almost.
I told Harry to say that.
Oh, he's listening to you. Okay, so we have this dorayaki, and so he ends up hiring this elderly woman, and the whole book takes a turn. I'm gonna actually flash like spoiler, because if you don't, this is just what I think is like mildly spoilery, but I do think that this is a little bit of a spoiler in case you wanted to go in blind. The blind would be, the basic premise is that this kid who has previously been incarcerated is now working in a dorayaki shop, and he befriends or hires this old woman, and he's like not really sure about her, but as you can imagine, a friendship eventually blooms. So, spoiler. All right. So we find out that this woman suffers from Hansen's disease, which is the same as leprosy. And from there, I thought it was so fascinating learning more about Hansen's disease and the way that the Japanese culture actually dealt with, and the way that they treated people, mostly like societally, that suffered from leprosy, and some of the stigmas and some of the cultural norms at the time. And I thought that was super fascinating. And so you find out that one of the people in the story suffers from Hansen's disease, or had suffered, not is currently suffering from Hansen's disease. And the meaning, like the way that person found meaning in life, even through some really difficult struggles. I thought in that way, it was really a sweet story. It kind of, in some ways, maybe for length, maybe for the economy of words, reminded me of Claire Keegan in a way. It just was a really short and pretty tight story. But unlike Claire Keegan, which I read Foster and I really thought was well done, well executed, didn't overstay its welcome, and I also didn't want any more from the story. Sweet Bean Paste, I kind of wanted more. There was this whole thing about Hansen's disease that I thought was just really interesting, and it had a space to develop into a longer novel. Like, I wanted to know more about Sentaro. I wanted to know more about this older woman that he had hired, and I just wanted more from the whole thing. And so it was interesting. I usually am like, this book's overwritten. Like, get it out of here. But in this instance, I was like, man, I really wish there was like 50 more pages to it. And so, but it was overall, it was a really interesting book. And if you're interested in like a sweet, short, quick read that is relatively satisfying, then Sweet Bean Paste is your book. Let's talk events, anniversaries, deaths, and awards. In terms of news events, there's really only one big one, and it's that Terry Pratchett who is a comic English novelist. He had an unfinished work on a hard disk, and he had it ruined. He had the hard disk crushed by a steamroller on his instructions. He had died in 2015, and he wanted that unfinished novel, I guess, to not be seen by anyone. So in the most dramatic way possible, he had that hard disk ruined, which is kind of funny In terms of anniversaries, in 2017, it was the 20th anniversary of the publication of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Henry David Thoreau's 200th birthday. It had been 200 years since Jane Austen's death, and the 350th anniversary of Jonathan Swift's birth. Deaths. Dennis Johnson passed away on May 24th. He has actually gotten a little bit of a revival, his works have, because a couple of books were included on the New York Times Best 100 Books of the 21st Century. So I feel like his name is floating around there a little bit. Also, Sue Grafton dies on December 28th at the very last few days of the year. She was in some ways like a pillar in the mystery writing world, even though I have not read anything by her. The Women's Prize for Fiction was awarded to Naomi Alderman for The Power. Have any of you read this? I know that I haven't. Also, the Booker Prize was awarded to George Saunders' Lincoln in the Bardo. The Hugo Award, which is a fantasy sci-fi award, was awarded to N.K. Jemisin for Obelisk Gate. The Nobel Prize for Literature was given to Kazuo Ishiguro. The Pulitzer Prize for Fiction was given to Colson Whitehead for The Underground Railroad, which I did read and frightened me. It truly horrified me. It was such a scary, intense book, at least in my view. And then the Walter Scott Prize, which is a historical fiction prize, was given to Sebastian Barry for Days Without End. We're outdoors. This is not my typical MO. I don't really know how well this is gonna go. I'm frightened that a neighbor is gonna come and discover that I'm talking to myself, talking to you all, talking to the camera, Yeah, I don't know if this is gonna work. I hear people. All right, outside, doing my thing. Okay, let's talk about The Heart's Invisible. I cannot take myself seriously like this. I cannot. Quite possibly a more risky scenario since I'm on my front porch, but there was a clip in which I was standing next to a tree and the sound was utterly terrible. I'm sure you can hear sirens going off, but that's okay. It's adding to the ambiance. Also riskier because anybody walking by or driving by are gonna see that I'm talking to my camera. So yes. Anyways, let's talk about The Heart's Invisible Furies. This is a book by John Boyne. My book club picked it, and to be honest, I was kind of hesitant to... The sirens are adding ambiance, y'all. I live in a tiny town, so I'm sorry, y'all. Okay, so The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. Book club picked it, and I was not sure if John Boyne was the author for me, so this was my first book by him. I think that this is not his most read book, but maybe one of his most well-received books. His most well-read book is The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which is, I believe, about the Holocaust. I've not read it yet. You would think I would have. I just haven't yet. So, The Heart's Invisible Furies is about a young man named Cyril who is born to an unwed mother. You find this out in the exposition that she's unwed and in this teeny little town in Ireland. And from there, she is kicked out of her town because of her situation. And she goes to a bigger city. I cannot remember. I think it's Dublin. I think she goes to Dublin, but now everything's just evading. Oh my gosh, there's my neighbor. Risky business over here. So Cyril's mother is in this situation. She gets kicked out of her small town. And again, in the beginning of the book, you find out that she gives her son up for adoption. And it's hard to talk about the novel when you don't get these first little bits covered, because from there he gets adopted by larger-than-life characters, and they insist, especially his adoptive father insists that he calls him his adopted father. So Cyril can't call him father, he has to call him adoptive father. And what's interesting is that Cyril is the calm amid the storm of characters, everyone is larger than life. All the characters that surround him are true characters with a capital C, larger than life, really have quirks and all this kind of stuff. And Cyril is the quiet one. He's reserved and kind of, you know, a romantic in his own way. And he's also gay. And so he's born in the 1940s in Ireland. And during that time, John Boyne does a really good job giving us an overview of what Ireland was like when I'm getting distracted. I'm self-conscious. So John Boyne does a really good job giving us an overview, the readers an overview of what it might have been like for a gay man in Ireland growing up through the 1940s, and just how difficult it was, and the public opinion of the Irish towards gay people. And I just felt like it was so well handled and just really an empathetic point of view. I will say that especially at throughout the first half of the book, that there is kind of quite a bit of like boy talk, and I think that it really can turn people off to the reading experience, like boys talking about girls and just exploring themselves in that way. The first, their first experiences with women, all of that stuff. And I know for a fact that a couple of people in the book club were not loving that part of the book. And for other books, I've been like, I don't like it. For this book, it seemed that it was very intentional and had a very integral part of the story. It was an integral part of the story, so I didn't mind so much. This sort of, I don't know, hypersexual, overly masculine young men are trying to be that way. But you really watch the characters grow, in a lot of ways, grow out of some of that and mature. And I really rooted for Cyril throughout. Okay, I'm going to go before. I really love the book. It's got to be one of my favorites for the year. And I feel like at any moment, a neighbor is going to catch me talking to the camera. And I would just be kind of embarrassed, even though I think at this point, most people most people that know me know that I have a YouTube channel. So, I don't know. So they should know, but I still get embarrassed. That's my rushed review. Oh, the noise is squirrels. They're chasing each other up the tree. We have like hundreds of squirrels out here, y'all. Oh, that's what it is. So anyways, I really enjoyed The Heart's Invisible Furies. I was really invested in Cyril. I thought he was fantastic, a fantastic character. And I loved him, and I really loved all of the other characters, and I don't know, I enjoyed the book. What can I say? Oh, it also won the inaugural BookTube prize, just so you know. So it's not just me who loved the book. A lot of booktubers out there really love the book too. All right, I'm gonna go before I continue to utterly embarrass myself. By 2017, Steve Donahue has expanded from just top 10 nonfiction and top 10 fiction. He now has lists for top 10 mystery, top 10 romance, top 10 reprints, top 10 translated books, and on and on. He has like top 10 lists for 10, 11, 12, 13 genres that he follows. And I'm really just cherry picking the top 10 nonfiction and top 10 fiction that, I'm not cherry picking, but I'm just going through those lists. But if you Google Steve Donahue top 10 lists, they are there, and there'll be like a lot to choose from. So nonfiction, number 10, My Life with Bob by Pamela Paul. She's an editor for the New York Times Book Review, and this is her book on books. Number 9, Welcome to Your World by Sarah Williams Goldhagen. This is an urban design study by an architecture critic. Number 8, No One Cares About Crazy People by Ron Powers, who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and he takes on the mental health care system in America. The title says it all for number 7, which is A New Literary History of Modern China, and this is edited by David Dearway Wang. Number 6 is The Egyptians by Jack Schenker. This is going to talk about the revolution in Egypt and it's supposed to be a big story with a lot of detail. Number 6 is The Death of Expertise by Tom Nichols. This is, Steve says it best, this slim, powerful book about the slow, seemingly irreversible strangulation of knowledge in the 21st century, saturated with social media and hot takes, could have easily been the year's most annoyingly bitter book, since the flip side of all that misinformation is the downgrading of experts in public discourse. But Tom Nichols handles the subject beautifully, maybe a little bit bitter, but ultimately really, really good, according to Steve. Number 4 is actually What Algorithms Want by Ed Finn, and the subtitle is Imagination in the Age of Computing, which actually sounds really interesting. Number 3 is The Exile by Kathy Scott Clark and Adrienne Levy. This is a dense book talking about the 10 years Osama bin Laden spent in exile, and following those 10 years of his life. This next book sounds really good. It's called The Bright Hour by Nina Riggs. It is about Riggs. It's her memoir. She has a cancer diagnosis in her 30s, and it's supposed to balance both sweetness and sorrow just beautifully. Steve says it's really touching and has stick-to-itiveness. Number 1 is Golden Legacy by Leonard Marcus. This is about little golden books, those little picture books that are probably on every kid's shelves, or I would hope in my sort of eternal optimism would be on every child's shelves. And it's about the hardworking men and women who created little golden books. And oh gosh, I love that. I kind of want this book right now. Steve's list, the number 1 book, is the number 1 book of the year, according to Steve, and that kind of touched me right now. I kind of want Golden Legacy now. Top 10 fiction, The State of Freedom by Neil McHergy. So this has 5 central characters that are talking about the immigrant experience, and I guess this could have been, according to Steve, a real misstep for the author, but he does it seamlessly and really brilliantly. It sounds fantastic. Number 9 is actually Less by Andrew Sean Greer, which I have mentioned earlier in this video. A really, really good book. Number 8, I just passed this up at a used bookstore, which is fine. But number 8 is The Book of American Martyrs by Joyce Carol Oates. I very famously didn't like Joyce Carol Oates's We Were the Mulvaneys. I did not like that book, but I really do want to give her a second shot. The Book of Martyrs is a chunkster though. Oh, interestingly, this book is a fiction book dealing with the raging debate on abortion. Of course, Steve mentions that Joyce Carol Oates is a hit and miss author for him as well. But this was a hit for him. Number 7 is a book that we've actually now seen. This is the 3rd time I'm mentioning it in the video. It's now made it in 3 sections of the video, and it is Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. It is about Abraham Lincoln and his grief, I believe, over losing a son. It is a very polarizing book. Lots of people said it has worked for them, and lots of people have told me that it has definitely not worked for them. Number 6, a book that I read, The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. Fantastic, really just a wonderful, wonderful book. A book I've literally never heard of, Motherland by Paul Theroux. Steve said it is about a tyrannical mother figure in Cape Cod who just lords over her power with her the brood of adult children. He said that the book has vividly memorable characters, which sounds like a book for me. I love a good character book. Number 4 is Always Happy Hour by Mary Miller. This is a short story about people, really, really poor people living in squalid living conditions, and it's supposed to be expertly crafted. Number 3 is This Is How It Always Is by Lori Frankel. This is about a normal family whose little boy wants to be a little girl. Steve said that this is actually a surprisingly earnest book. Number 2 is Night of Fire by Colin Thebron. This is about a house that catches on fire and the 6 people who live there. It intertwines their stories, and it's supposed to be absolutely brilliant. Okay, and the number 1 book, which I own on my shelves and I really want to read, is The Ministry of Utmost Happiness by Aruhiti Roy. This is according to Ted, that's my husband. According to Steve, I actually watched him talk about the Booker season, which this book was nominated for the Booker, but Lincoln and the Bardo won. But Steve said that this book, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, is like miles beyond Lincoln and the Bardo. Roy takes a group of characters and somehow manages to tell a dozen stories that are sprawling about India through this group of characters, and it's supposed to be about how we are connected in the larger world. He said that the result is an opulent, magnificent sprawl of a novel. Does that not sound amazing? So I really need to get to this, especially since I surprised my own self by having read a ton of 2017 books. Of the books that I want to read, I actually want to read the nonfiction book on books. I think that sounds really awesome. I really want to read The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. The Book of American Martyrs sounds intriguing. A State of Freedom sounds intriguing, but Motherland also caught my attention. So those are the books that I want to read. I hope you enjoyed this video about 2017. I know I really enjoyed making it. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye!